Hello everyone, David with Some Game Company here. In my last update, I promised I would show some of the new assets this week. So what I've done is created a small level containing these new objects, and I'll go ahead and show off their functionality and usage. Um, One thing that I wanted to do is create a set of buttons in our game. All good puzzles have buttons, so I figured I'd go ahead and toss them in our game so that we can get some of those features that other games use to progress through the levels and put some puzzle elements together. Um, I've only created 4 so far, but that may change depending on what I need in the future. If something comes up that requires a different type of button other than the ones I've already created, I may end up creating more. But what I've got so far, I think, is going to take us a long way for what we want to accomplish. The first button here, the green one, and all of these icons are subject to change. I don't know if they're really good depictions on what they do, but right now I think they'll do just fine. So the first one, it is a one-time button. As soon as you hit it, it does not reset. It has no reset whatsoever. So it's one time you hit it, and that's it. The second one is a pressure button. You have to be touching it in order for it to set. And if you're no longer touching it, it resets and turns off. The third button, pretty self-explanatory. It's a time button, currently set to 3 seconds, but of course you can set that to any interval of time that you wish. The fourth button is a toggle button. By default, it is off. If you touch it, it turns on. You touch it again, it turns off. So I'll give a little demonstration of how that looks in the game. Alright, so, oh, and one thing you'll notice too is that the Ghoulian, he looks a little different now. He doesn't have a black border around him. We are working on making the character look a little different, trying to make him look a little bit more like Goo. Before he kind of looked more like fish eggs to me. So if you see the little Ghoulians, you pick them up and they kind of melt into one another, and we're trying to accomplish that effect with the Ghoulian. So he's still a work in progress. So that's why it doesn't look anything like he did before. So first button, like I said, it is a one-time button. Hit it, triggers, you can't reset it. The second button is a pressure button. You have to stay on it for it to be set. You leave the button, it turns off. Third button is a timed button, 3 seconds. You can hear it ticking away, and when it finishes, it has a little chime that goes off. Third button is our fourth button is a toggle button, so you just turn it on, and you can just turn it off. And those are the 4 buttons that we have so far. Show some, I guess, proper usage of these buttons, kind of what we're going to be doing with them. I built a gate up here, and the gate's currently closed. But what we can do is we can hook any of these 4 buttons up to this gate to control it from opening or closing. So let's do that real fast, and I'll kind of show how that works with the script. Go down to our script graph here, and let's do the pressure button, the second button here. So I'm going to take the script for the gate, move it down here close to the pressure button, and what I've done on these scripts is I have color coded the parts of the scripts are going to tie in with other scripts black, just for easy identification. So on the pressure button, however, it's a little bit different than the other buttons in that the fact that their sequence of events are typically triggered by a flip-flop. But since the pressure button only has one thing that really triggers it, and that's the player touching it, we're just going to output from the player object node, or I'm sorry, the zone that's around that button is touching player. We're going to output that into the inputs for what trigger the gate to open and close. So it's touching player, and we'll bring this down here one more time and go into the OR. And the reason why I have an OR, and I'll probably put this on the not too as well, is because you can pretty much limitless on the amount of things you can have trigger this button. If you wanted to set up a really complex sequence of events, you could do that just by adding a couple more nodes with some ORs to make it control various things. So let's go ahead and hit play, and we'll see if this, you know what, before we do that, let's move the button a little bit closer to the gate. That way we can kind of see it in action. I'll move that up here. That's good. And play. Alright, that's unfortunate. That wasn't supposed to happen. Give me a second. Alright, let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so there our button is. If we touch the button, you can hear the motors rev up and open the gates. There you go. Sounds like a little electric motor or a servo. And to get an idea of how this could actually work in the game, consider you have the cow and you need to get the cow past the gate, but you couldn't actually take the cow with you. You had to get them through the gate, and the button was set way back in the back somewhere. So you can see a fan over here, and I'll demonstrate how that works here in a second. But if there was a cow in front of this gate and you had to hit the button and the fan was blowing, well, you'd hit the button back here, the fan would blow the cow through, but as soon as you left, the gate would close, so you'd really have no way of getting to the gate. So you'd have to progress through the level to get to where the cow is currently, just to give you kind of an idea. So that's how that works. Let's take a look at this object up here that I just described, the fan. This is another object that I've been working on last week, and there's a couple variations that I've made. This particular variation, this is the first type of the fan, and what it is, I have a crank box here, and when the player touches a zone in front of this lever, what it does is it activates a series of events and it starts a timer. The timer rotates the crank goes all the way up to a certain position in the crank box, and it kind of like an old-timey wind-up toy. It winds it up. As soon as you get off of it, it starts winding down, in turn spinning the fan and doing all kind of movements with the tree and the gearboxes and rotations with the gears. Kind of looks pretty neat in the game. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that real fast, and then I'll start breaking down the script. Alright, so like I said, there is a zone right here that if the player touches it, it triggers the timer to start counting. And the timer kicks off a lot of different events. So as soon as I leave the fan, or the lever, the fan starts turning. Of course, the wind's blowing me now, so I really can't move. Once again, let's see if I can do it without being blown away. Of course, you see the trees jumping around, the fan spinning, the gears actually spin and rotate, and this kind of, the usage for this, it kind of goes back to what I was describing a second ago with, trying to get the cow through the gate, the sequence of events that would have to take place in order to do that. That's kind of some of the things that this fan will be used for in the future, and as well as some other things. Like I said, there's another type that I've made, and it is kind of an automated fan that has a motor on it, in which case you could hook any of these 4 buttons up to control turning it on or off. Alright, that's the fan. So I'll take a second and kind of break down how that fan works with the script. It's pretty complex. Let's see. So like I was saying, there is a few different things that take place in order to make this fan work. The first thing that really triggers this is the zone that I have right here in front of the lever. So you touch the zone, and then it outputs and starts causing all these different chains of events to take place. The first thing that it does is I have a float switcher going into the timer. The timer is what counts and determines really how fast that lever is pushing forward or pushing back, depending on whether you're touching it or not. So in turn, what that is doing is if you push it forward faster than it unwinds. So it unwinds a lot slower. Just like I was saying a little bit ago, like the old wind-up toys, it works in the same manner, that you can twist it up really fast, and it kind of expels the energy at a slower rate. And that's what that's essentially doing, is it's changing the speed at which this timer counts. Currently it's set to 0.3 when you're touching it, but as soon as you're not touching it, it's going to set it to, it's 0.3, and then when you're touching it, it's going to be set to 1. So you can see that it's almost twice as fast pushing it forward than it is unwinding. So once that takes place, some of the other things that happen, let's see here, it actually outputs into the sound. So when you're touching the zone, it starts playing the crank sound, that sound right there. And what I have is that when it gets to the time range gets to the upper range of the timer, it prevents this sound from playing. So the only thing that's triggering this sound is when the player is actually touching that zone, and it keeps looping that sound, that simple, 0.5 second sound. And as soon as that lever gets to this area over here, or to the upper range of the timer, it does not allow the player to trigger that sound anymore, so that when you get to the end, and if you're still just sitting there and not moving, it's not continuously looping that sound. It gives you the effect that you've actually reached the end of being able to push that lever to its max position. Another thing that it's doing is when the timer counts back down, when the player is not touching it, it gets to a certain level, and I'm doing some comparisons here. So when it gets to a lower level, it plays the ding noise. So I've got it kind of like the times equal to, let's see, yeah, I've got it equal to 4.2, which is one of the lower levels. So 4.2 is the very bottom of the timer. When it gets to 4.2 and it's greater than 4.2, it sets the flip-flop that allows, and the reason why I did this is so the ding doesn't play when you first start the level. So it has to actually be greater to trigger that to happen. And then it actually determines, after the first initial trigger, after you touch it, it determines what the timer is set to, and if it ever gets back to 4.2, it'll play that ding for the first time. So that's what that is. The gears, of course, when the timer is counting, the gears are set to rotate. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The tree, and what I've got it doing here is I've got two timer up and downs going into the tree. One is controlling the orientation, and one is controlling the scale. So it kind of gives that effect that it's twisting and bouncing up and down as the machine is actually in action. What else do we have in here? We've got the particles down here at the bottom. These are the leaf particles. So pretty simple trigger for this is, as the timer is counting, the particles are emitting. Pretty straightforward. And I think other than that, I think that's pretty much it. The fan is rotating the same as if it's counting. If it's counting, the fan's going to be rotating. And one of the things that I had to get around with this engine's limitations, or not really the engine's limitations, but the way we have this game set up, its own limitations, are the way that we're compiling or composing these maps with 2D sprites. The draw, if you have anything that's vertical, it's gonna cause some funky things depending. So you can see right here, the top of the tree is actually higher than the fan. So the top of the tree is being drawn before the fan. So it gives the effect that the fan is actually behind the top of the tree, which we know that in reality that wouldn't be the case. Same thing with the fan shaft. In the back, the fan shaft should actually be above the middle point of the fan, so that the fan shaft is drawn before the fan. So what I've done to compensate for that graphic anomaly is I've created a zone behind the fan, and I'll show this in action here in a second, that if the player is touching that zone, it actually shifts that fan's position up or down to give the illusion that the shaft is drawing first, or the tree is drawing last, and that kind of gets rid of that whole drawing issue. It's very it's kind of a hack, but it works really well. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that real fast. So if you look right here at the fan, it's drawing properly because, of course, we're not touching the zone, and its default location is drawing the fan before the tree and the post, or the shaft. But as soon as we go to the back, ever so slightly, you can see the fan actually drop down in position, and the post gets drawn first. It happens pretty quickly, and if you're not really paying too much attention to it, you'll never notice it. But if you're just wanting to burn some time and find all the little nuances and glitches in the game, then yeah, somebody will probably notice that. That's the only way that I figured out right now that I can get around this problem, and I think it works pretty well. So we're probably just going to go ahead and leave it as is. I don't think too many people will notice that. So that's the fan. I think that pretty much wraps up what I've done as far as creating new objects this week. One thing that Todd is working on is, like I said, creating the Ghoulian to be a little bit more Goo-like, and I'm sure he'll give a little bit more in-depth detail into how he accomplished that in one of his updates here shortly. So until next week, I think that's about it. Hopefully we'll have some of these elements and some of these assets put into use in some maps that I can show you in the following update. So thanks for watching, guys.